I had to get up in front of this room of, 1,000 people and talk about why this big agency work that was a part of my network work is not going to work in Canada. And I was terrified, but I did it. And the whole global plan got scrapped because of what I said in that room. When I was even at Red Lion, like early days of Red Lion, if I wanted to start my own agency, I would have said, absolutely not. I'm not crazy.
Really?
Yeah, the whole time through, because I got asked it quite a few times. And I always said no. But like with literally everything else in my life, it kind of just happened. All the boring stuff, like the paperwork and the legal stuff and the money and where is clients going to come from, you can't half do those things. You
Yes, you
can't
can't.
half start a creative agency in Toronto. That's called freelance.
And we are recording. Kaitlin Doherty, thank you so much for stopping by today. I'm looking forward to this.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It is a snowstorm in Toronto, and as we were discussing before we went live, yeah, it's could we call it a yellow snow day? Which is a weird thing to say because anyone who's unfamiliar with what we're talking about is going to say, why are they talking about something as vile as that? But it turns out that the government of Canada has assigned colors to different levels of winter storms, and we are at yellow, which is
Yes.
bad, but not as bad as it could be.
I think I don't know. I think it's really worse for the drivers. The roads are slick, but it's mild snow, I would say.
I would have loved to have been in that meeting when they're just going through the different colors because there's so many colors on the spectrum. Like, how granular are you going to get? Like, why? Like, someone must have been chuckling when they said, okay, yeah, we're going to have yellow. And knowing
Yellow
that,
snow.
and knowing
Yeah.
that you're likely to make more of a big deal about the snowstorm as it's more intense and assigning yellow to an intense snowstorm means you're going to be throwing it out there more. Someone is definitely chuckling in Ottawa as this comes up.
Yeah, I just don't think it was the thing we needed. Truthfully, I don't think we needed to color code the snow. Of all the things that we need, that didn't seem to be one of the things.
That's what government specializes in, taking our money and giving us things back we didn't ask for, nor do we need. But we do need this conversation, so I'm very much looking forward to it. So let's start from the beginning. You're the founder and president of the Local Collective. It's an agency, so
Yes.
give us the 101 as to what the Local Collective is and what your role as founder and president entails.
For sure. So, Matt Litzinger and I, who's my partner, and he's the chief creative officer at the Local Collective, we started it almost 8 years ago. I cannot believe that is a thing. And I think we started this creative agency to kind of bring all of our learnings from our whole careers and make kind of our little dream, I would say, of what we thought was possible in the creative advertising space. 8 years ago, the dominant conversation was all around programmatic at the time. It was very much about efficiency, and we were sitting in these boardrooms where we were seeing kind of business numbers really stagger, if not drop, as these media metrics were going through the roof. So we'd have, really complicated conversations of how a tweet got 600% extra reach, but then the actual return of what the creative was supposed to do was all not talked about at all. It really was, these conversations of unworking dollars. And and it and the way it was being talked about was all through this lens of efficiency. And for us, we saw a huge opportunity in that because, media is a powerful tool. There's so many different media channels out there. You have to really decide where you're going to be and how you're going to show up. But the how you're going to show up is a really, really, really important part of breaking through, getting through the digital slop, really firming your position in the marketplace among people, among regular Canadians. And we saw an opportunity to kind of do that with our own agency. And that's what we've done for the last 8 years.
Well, Caitlin, we're going to come back to that later in our chat, but as always, we go back to the beginning. And you are from, let's emphasize this because there's a bit of a joke behind it. I'm looking forward to the stories. You're from St. John, New Brunswick, not St. John's, Newfoundland.
Correct. The two often get mistaken. There's many people that I know of people that have thought they were going to visit their friend in St. John, New Brunswick, and they ended up in Newfoundland because they got the two mistaken. It happens more often than you would think of people getting it mixed up. But yeah, I'm from St. John, New Brunswick. It's a very special city. It's a small city. It's the oldest city in Canada, and it has a lot of heritage, which I think it was a fantastic place to grow up. Uh, that's where Moosehead is based. That's where,
Moosehead Beer is based in
yeah,
St. John. I
in
had no
St.
idea.
John.
I totally
Yeah.
thought that they were a Halifax brand.
No, it's a St. John brand. So it's a very small town with quite a bit of big business there. And it's a port city. So, I went to high school looking out on the ocean, which is pretty special.
And there's another company, I think it's Red Cabin. I'm gonna mess up the name of it. It's a potato chip company from New Brunswick as
Red
well too.
Urban
Oh,
Bar no, Covered
Red
Bridge?
Covered Bridge, yes. I think
Covered
they've got
Bridge.
Covered Bridge, yes. Some of the best potato chips ever
Well,
come
do
out
you
of.
know on the East Coast, the thing is, do you have your storm chips?
What? Sorry, no, no, you're dropping some knowledge here for everyone. What are storm
So
chips?
if there's a snowstorm, did you get your storm chips?
So
Which is your
those are your
potato
ration
chips.
those are your rations?
But to get you through the storm, because we don't have storms like what we call storms here in Toronto. There's legitimate like storms that you can't get out. But that's the thing. Did you get your storm chips on the East
In
Coast?
Interesting, because anytime you see someone talking about rations because you can't get out of the house, you're thinking like canned beans. But I
No,
love
no,
how in New
no.
Brunswick, it's like, no, no, you gotta have the party
Storm chips.
essentials, storm chips, beer, and that's all you need.
Yeah, definitely an alcoholic beverage and some chips.
That's how we do it in Canada.
Yeah.
So, give us more insight into what life was like growing up in St. John.
It was great. Everything I cannot recommend that city more to people. It was a fantastic place to grow up. My parents both owned businesses, which was a great training ground for me. I think probably led the way to where I am today. And it gave me a lot of freedom. I think when I see the kids in Toronto, there's a lot more pressure here because there's so much competition. There was a lot less pressure there to just be a kid, which is really nice. And then, like I said, because there's a lot of big business there, you kind of had this small town reality, but with a big city vibe in a lot of ways, because there was a lot of money flowing through the city, which is kind of nice. Best of both worlds.
No, that's definitely what you want. Money's always a good thing.
Mhm.
Let's go back a little bit to your interest or hobbies. I ask this question of everyone, and there's 2 parts I wanna play it here. So, the first one is you were in the
Mhm.
performance arts, but then the other thing too is let's start with this one. You're the first person I think, and this is gonna be episode 138, to bring up student government.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, well, yeah, I went to St. John High School. It's a great high school, and I was really lucky that it's one of the only public high schools that have the International Baccalaureate program. So as a part of that, you had to have a very robust extracurricular activity. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's like an
No, not at
international
all. Keep
high
going with
school
it.
program
Okay.
that so my high school exams were graded by someone in Australia, not my own teachers. So I think it was
Okay.
originally set up for kids that were like uh kids of diplomats so that they could drop in and out of different places and have kind of a,
Okay.
a streamlined curriculum. So like the entire globe studies a certain St. John or Shakespeare play at the same time. But it meant that I went to a wildly competitive high school academically, but then as a part of it, you have to have a very round. You have to have a well-rounded approach to your curriculum. It can't just be academics. You also had to be in the arts. You had to be in sports, and then you had to be kind of in the social side of things. So we were kind of all in everything. So I did musicals, and I did yearbook, and I did student government and swim team and,
Well,
anything.
you're on the swim team. Wait, what was your
I was
event?
on the
I was
swim
on the swim
team.
team in high school. Yeah. What was your event?
The 50-meter freestyle. I was a sprinter.
I did freestyle as well and, back. Not very well,
Yeah.
but I was
Yeah,
proud of it.
high school was where I peaked, so that says something. But I'm an exceptionally good swimmer for people that don't know how to swim.
Well, George Carlin said it the best, "Swimming isn't a sport, it's a way to keep from drowning." So, depends on how you
Correct.
wanna look at it. It's a way to survive.
Yes, yes.
You mentioned that the school was very competitive academically.
Mhm.
Did you find that when you went to university then, not to jump ahead on your university career, because I do wanna stay on this part for a bit, that you were a little bit more competitive than your peers?
Uh, e
So,
maybe,
like,
yes.
another way of putting it is that that was an interesting reflection you had. Was that something that you reflected on later on, like, after you're done your academic life going, "Wow, they" and just meeting other people from other high schools and seeing and hearing what they went through going, "Man, I had no idea how competitive my high school was academically and maybe on other levels compared to the average high school in Canada or New Brunswick even."
Yeah, I think in terms of a standard, um, and it is really special, just to give it props, to have for a public high school, to be able to have this. I By the time I was in grade 12, I had I when I finished grade 11, I'd finished grade 12. So when I was in grade 12, I was doing first year university. So when I mean highly competitive academic, it was like if, you know, AP was because you were not doing well in a class, not so. Uh, yes, for sure, it prepped me for university in some ways. In some ways, is anyone ready for university? That first semester, oof, all of us, fending for our lives a little bit. But yeah, I think in terms of the pressure and stress of like exams that can happen in university, I think during crunch times in particular, that stress didn't impact me maybe the way it would have. I saw some other students, and the same can be said for the other kids that went from my high school, because we were already in it for how stressful exams were at the time.
What about the performing arts aspect of high school? You mentioned that also played a big role. Were you a singer, dancer, musician?
I was a singer, so I sang in quite a few choirs. I was the lead in different musicals, which were in my small town a big deal. And I also did summer programs and helped with musical camps for kids and kids from underprivileged families. So it was definitely a very big part of when I was younger. It was fun. It was a great outlet. It was a great way. If I think of my life now, when I really get no stage fright of standing in front of a boardroom, it's probably because I sang in front of rooms of thousands of people, which was kind of cool. Now I just did it at the time, but now I think that it was a little bit of training ground, which is great. Very geeky of me, I think. And I'm surprised I'm talking about this on a podcast, but that's okay. But it was great. And it also gave me, um, a creative outlet, which I think is really important for kids. Everyone's creativity is going to present itself differently, and that was just one of the ways it presented for me.
You mentioned the University of New Brunswick, and you were taking classes a little bit earlier than some of your peers were. So take us through why the University of New Brunswick, and you studied marketing and human resource management. Why those topics?
Oh my gosh. So I went to the University of New Brunswick in Fredericton. I took a business degree and I had a double major in marketing and human resource management and a minor in political science. And it was a great university. I couldn't recommend it enough for people wanting like that true university experience. Um, I
I've heard
think
Atlantic
that
Canada's universities very well.
Yeah, yeah, it just I think it's the campuses are tighter, it's a little more affordable, so you can do more things. It's definitely a great place to be a young person, and, party culture on the East Coast is just different, it hits different. Um but I think for me, truth if I'm being really honest, I sort of fell into it. I don't thi For as academically focused as I was when I was in high school, I was lucky in a lot of ways that I graded really well, I had very high grades, and when I was thinking about going to university, I really didn't know what I wanted to do at all. I had never heard of an ad agency, I didn't even know what that was. Um, and I didn't wanna do history because I just felt like that was a waste of time. I hated sciences when I was in high school.
I don't blame you
Um,
there. I wasn't crazy about
I
science
I
either.
hated them, so that was just a hard no,
Did your guidance
and
counselor try to pressure you into the sciences and tell you you need the math and sciences or you will be living in a tent under a bridge? And I'm not being insensitive
No.
towards the homeless, but, like, that's what was conveyed to me in high school.
No. I had a physics teacher tell my mother because I had a maybe like a I was one of my lowest marks, like a C plus or something in physics, and my mom was just not happy about it, so she went to speak to my physics teacher, and he said to her, "She just doesn't like it. She's not gonna get a better grade. She's just doing it doesn't matter what it is. You could put her in the lowest form of this class, and she will still get that grade. She just doesn't wanna do it." And that is kind of my personality in a nutshell.
Okay, but someone who went to a competitive high school, were you okay with that? Like, were you looking at this going, "I just need the credit to graduate. I'm never gonna study this again." Like, I kinda tried I wasn't very good at math, and I tried to have those conversations with my math teacher saying, "Hey, if I get by, I promise I'm not gonna throw myself into this any further. I don't wanna be here, and you don't want a student like me, so let's just try to work something out."
I think a couple things, like, one because of it's a little because of the way it was set up, I was taking grade 11 classes in grade 10, so when that
Okay.
conversation happened, I was in grade 10. So I was young enough that I still had 2 year like, university wasn't really a thing yet. Like, the competitiveness comes out, I think, when action is attached to it, when you know you're gonna go to school, you have to do something with this, and I just stopped taking physics at that point. So I took it to whenever I needed to, but I had 2 more years ahead of me.
And you mentioned your mom. She's also your biggest influence. Why is that?
Yeah. Um, oh my gosh, my mom is amazing. Anyone that knows me knows how much I love her. She's a serial entrepreneur, I would say. She every business that she's had has turned to gold. Right now, she owns a restaurant, an Italian restaurant in St. John. She's the chef and the owner, and she's had it for 9 or 10 years, I think, and every year it's in the top 100 Italian restaurants in the country, top 100 most romantic restaurants in the country, just over and over the top again. And she's funny. She's so funny. She's been contacted by the Food Network multiple times to be on different shows, and she just says, "No, do you know how hard it is to get from St. John, New Brunswick to Los Angeles? Not a chance."
Oh, geez, so it's not like they'd be coming to New Brunswick. 'Cause when you
Yeah,
dropped that, I
so
thought it would be kind of like a reality show where they're doing like a one-off episode where they get to see the
no,
inner
just to filming something. Anyway, it's happened a bunch of times, and she said no every single time. It just doesn't interest her because she just feels like it just doesn't impact, uh, her business at the like, she's like, "It would be great for fame and notoriety and all of those things, but people aren't traveling from LA to come to New St. John to go to my restaurant." So she's very pragmatic about some of that stuff. But above and beyond that, she's been a great teacher. She, uh works exceptionally hard. She has an unbelievable ability to do it without compromising her family at all, which I have no idea how she did, especially when we were little. And she's really creative. She's always built a business on her own back and things that she wanted to create and do. And I think being surrounded by that all the time and watching her be successful regardless of whatever else was happening, the outside factors, what she was up against, the, political climate, what was happening with our family, whatever the thing might be, she always made it really, really, successful. And growing up in that sort of environment where you kind of see hard work paying off, and you see someone who can do it, make money, make a living for their family, all of those things, and then still, summer vacation, was there after school, always there on the weekends, just all the things that you want. It's really inspiring.
and you said she's the chef and the owner of this particular restaurant.
Yeah,
Like,
she
those are
owns it with
those are
2 other
2
partners.
okay, I was gonna say those are like 2 very big hats to wear, like running a restaurant and literally running the kitchen in the back as well too, because there's a lot that happens out
Yes.
front and in the back.
I know, you'd think she'd retire.
You know what? Some people like keeping busy, and I
Yeah,
don't
she
I
would.
don't blame her for doing that. So did she come from a family of entrepreneurs? Like, where does this sort of serial entrepreneur spirit come from?
She told me once that she always, because she's had her own company since she was 18. She's quite literally never worked for anyone else. And, she had an aerobic studio in the 80s in Manhattan in New York City, and it was in
Really?
the top yeah, and it was in the top that's where I was born,
You're
and
from New
that
York? You're born in
originally,
New York?
yes. I was
Okay, I
born
had
in New
no
York
idea.
City. Yep. Yes, I was born in the Upper West Side of Manhattan, but it was in the top 10 aerobic studios in the 80s in Manhattan. Like, th and that as, like, a little microcosm is her entire life. It's every business that she's ever run, and I think, she comes from hardworking family. Her mom was a real estate agent, very successful real estate agent. Her dad and my grandfather is a artist, and also he was a competitive shooter, rifle shooter, and he's one of the best in the world. He was just inducted in the New Brunswick Sports Hall of Fame. He won like the equivalent to worlds multiple times and met the queen and all of that kind of stuff. So it
Gone to the
just
Olympics by any chance for shooting?
it wasn't an Olympic sport when he was doing it.
Ah, okay.
Otherwise, he absolutely would have. He was the captain of the Canadian team, and then he coached it afterwards, when he retired. So, and I think the one thing that is kind of consistent is it, my grandparents and my mom and my dad all came from very humble beginnings. It's not like there was a lot of wealth or a lot of people opening doors. And same for me. And I think that you had to do it yourself. Like no one was doing it for you. You either were going to do it exceptionally well, or what was the point? And I think that was a really, and also there was a lot of proof all around us all the time that it could actually be achieved. You didn't need someone to do it for you. You could actually just do it yourself, which I think was valuable.
Okay, as someone who frequents his share of Italian restaurants, you've gotta name drop
Mhm.
this pl you've gotta name drop it.
Oh, it's called Italian by Night, and it's in St. John, New Brunswick, and it's delicious.
And this isn't your mother's first foray into the restaurant business, because your very first job was, correct me if I'm wrong, working at her deli.
Yeah, she had an Italian deli when I was a kid, um, and when I was in, like, guess middle school, was when she had that, and, it was great. I learned how to cook there. Um, it's crazy now to think that I was 13 years old cooking for humans, real adults that were coming in to buy my food.
I'm thinking like
Um
mortadella and like provolone on these giant Kaisers. That's what's going through my head when you say Italian deli.
No, yeah, I guess we had some sandwiches, but at the time, it was really hard to get imported. It's not like grocery stores now or even grocery stores that are in Toronto. So at the time, you couldn't get things like buffalo mozzarella. It was really hard to get
Oh
Parmesan
my god.
cheese. Like you couldn't get some of these like good Italian olive oil. So my mom saw this as an opportunity, and she had this Italian deli that had really good pasta that wasn't, you know, kind of the
I know what you're talking about, the freeze-dried off the shelf stuff
yeah.
from the supermarkets.
It's just and it was the first time it had ever been in the city. There wasn't any at the superstore. There wasn't any at Sobeys. They didn't have that kind of those products in yet. So she was the first one to bring it into the city to the province, actually.
So after graduation, you jumped into the advertising industry. You stayed in St. John's, and it was an agency called, if I got it right, Revolution Strategy?
Yeah. Yes, that
So
was the agency.
so marketing and HR you're studying. Like you said before, you had no idea what advertising was when you jumped into university. How did you discover this agency, and how did you discover, I guess, the profession in general? What attracted you to it?
Again, I feel a little bit like my whole life is this. It sort of just happened. So before this, when I was in university, I was waitressing, and although I was finishing my degree, I was a little disenchanted with what I was going to be able to find out there. I had a professor say to a class of 50 students, 4 of you are going to be able to succeed in this. So I wasn't feeling overly optimistic
You gotta
about.
love when they say that to you. It's kinda, couldn't you
I
have said that
know.
before the first tuition payment in first year?
It seemed like, shame on that educator for saying that. Like,
And
no,
shame on that educator for not trying harder.
yeah, it felt so silly to me to, say that to these people instead of trying to help them. Anyway, so I wasn't particularly, optimistic. I assumed I'd just have to keep waitressing if I'm being serious, and, uh my mom had met, this woman who, was the president of the agency, and she said to me, "You're gonna have to do something besides waitressing." So you're meeting with this woman who was basically I was forced into the interview. Um, so I met with her, and, she was one of my first mentors beside my mom. It was a small agency, but again, because St. John, had this very unique kind of business culture inside of the city, it gave me some great opportunities and great exposure. And I really liked the, I think I really liked the entrepreneurial spirit inside of agencies from day one. Even when you're a kid, even at the big agencies, there is a certain level of autonomy that you just don't get in other industries. And
Yes, I agree with that.
because everything is so even, if you're the AOR for whoever, everything is still very project based. Everything has a start and a stop timeline to it. It's like these little mini kind of entrepreneurial sort of businesses almost that you're sort of creating and shepherding through the agency and creating something, and then it's over and you move on to the next thing. So I think I liked the speed and the freedom I felt inside of it right away.
And you started as an account assistant and then moved up into account coordinator. How did your responsibilities change when you moved up the ladder?
I think with account service, every step just comes with more, uh, more ownership over over the brand. I think you start and the conversations get a little bit more senior. So when I was the first role was very just tied to whatever um, the team kind of said I needed to do. And then even with that small step to an account coordinator, which is, arguably the most junior position, I got to run some of my own things and I got to email the client directly and I got to go and set up for an event myself, like these little things that were more mine and I didn't have to wait to be told what to do. And then uh, as I got more senior, that it just those little things become bigger things.
When you had the opportunity to take authorship of those projects, is that when you started to say to yourself, this is the profession for me? Because that's something we don't talk about is that a lot of people after university will jump into a job thinking that's going to be their forever career. And a lot of people end up eh, jumping out of it very quickly because they realize maybe finance or HR wasn't for me. And in that instance, when it came to advertising, because like you said, you were forced into this interview originally from your mom. So was there a bit of apprehension that this would be your forever career? And was that the turning point where you said, you know what, I can definitely do this and I like doing it as well?
Yeah, in the beginning, before I got into the agency, I thought, oh, because I didn't grow up with parents that went to an office every day.
Ah, good
Um,
point. Okay.
so going into an office felt really weird to me. In the beginning, it felt weird to get dressed up and like get coffee and sit at my desk and all of those kind of things felt quite foreign to me when I first started. It's just not how I grew up. My mom was physically moving all the time. Um, and, my dad was on the road a lot, so it wasn't that aspect was really weird for me to get used to. But I think, yeah, once I got into it and had a little bit more when I felt like I could see the difference I was making, when I could see that, like, what I did mattered to how the project came out or the creative came out or I fought for something and it worked and it made a difference. I loved that feeling. And I think it's really special to be able to work in creativity. I don't look at Excel documents all the time. I look at silly ads sometimes, and that's fun.
And I like what you touched on there as well too, is that that sort of authorship that you get over your projects, it allows you to take pride in your work. Like you can point at something
Mhm.
and say, I did that. I had a hand in it.
Mhm. Yeah. And I remember I mean this is kind of jumping ahead, but I remember uh, just different moments in my career where I know I made a difference, and they were at different kind of transition moments for me, and it felt great.
And with advertising, sometimes you get credit for it and sometimes you don't. You just kind of have to acknowledge when you did it.
Yeah, I never really. focused so much on that, I have to say. I think that was maybe a bit of a gift, my kind of oblivious nature to the who's getting credit piece of things,
Mm.
especially when I was younger, because I think it became a little bit more present as I got a little bit older. But when I was younger, I never thought about it. I was so naive. I just assumed we were all getting credit. We were a team. And I think that really helped me because it made it so people wanted me to be on projects because I was just so easy to work with.
Let's talk about your next move, though, because you leave New Brunswick and you moved to Toronto, and that was at
Yes.
field day. So, first and
Yes.
foremost, why the move to Toronto? Like, did the role come first that forced you to move,
No.
or was it the other way around?
I did all the things that stupid girls do and I followed a boy. Followed a boy to
Oh,
Toronto.
okay. Followed a boy to Toronto.
I followed a boy to Toronto. And I didn't have a job and I didn't know anybody. I didn't know a single person. I had only ever been to Toronto once before, about 4 months before. So I didn't know the city at all. Toronto was not on my radar at all as a city to come to. And I think that's probably because I was born in New York. So I always assumed maybe I'd go to New York or maybe I'd go to London. Like I thought I would go to a big city, but Toronto was not on my radar whatsoever.
Why,
Um,
why, why not New York? Considering that you already had, I imagine, the American passport because you were a citizen.
um, I don't know. It just never happened.
Perfect. So, okay, so you follow the boy to Toronto. And
Mhm.
what is your first impression of Toronto? Because, like you said, you're from a really big city. You've been living in a smaller city, and now you come to kind of this medium-sized city that is Toronto at the time.
Yeah, I found it incredibly unfriendly, I have to
You're not the
say.
first person to say that. I've
It's
heard a
a
lot of
pretty
people when they come to Toronto.
unfriendly
Yeah,
place. Um, yeah, it was pretty lonely when I first got here, and it took a while to get to know Toronto. I think that sometimes I feel like Toronto could use a little therapist to, like, feel better about itself, but,
yep.
I, it was as an outsider coming in, it was kinda interesting to get to know, and then at the time when I moved here, it was not a good time for agencies. People were laying off people like crazy. There was big cuts happening, so I didn't plan that well at all. I slept on an air mattress for 3 months because I really couldn't afford to live here. I remember, like, my treat on a Friday night is I'd get a bottle of sparkling water, like, forget wine.
Jeez.
I was very poor.
Okay, so you said 3 months on a mattress. You're looking for a
Yeah.
job. Sparkling water is your treat on a Friday. Knowing that you have a support group opportunity back in, say, St. John, and you're clearly happy there, why not say this isn't for me and just go back? Like, what made you
Ugh,
continue?
'cause I wanted to do it. I wanted to prove to myself I could do it. I don't think there's anything other than that. It felt like if I'm gonna burn out in this city, I'm gonna burn out, and I can go back. I certainly had that safety net. Like, it's not like I have a fantastic family. They would have been there to catch me and been thrilled I came home. They were not happy when I left. So,
Really?
that oh, no, not at all. My mother would have loved me to live down the street from her forever.
Gotcha, okay.
Um and, that would have been great. I would have had a great life in St. John. I really would have. But I have a great life here, and I think that I grew a lot. I think that, I just wanted to see if I could do it, and then I got the job at Field Day, which was a really small agency, and, um, I wasn't particularly happy there, I would say, only because I felt like I moved to this big city and I didn't wanna work in a small agency. I wanted to work at a big agency.
Gotcha.
So
So you kind
but
of felt like a lateral move even though you were moving to a different city. Is that a safe way to put it?
yeah, it was the job I could get, and never, ever, ever underestimate the job you can get when there's not a lot of jobs around. And in a lot of ways, it prepped me in like, I'm glad that was the first job now, but as a young person, the foresight, whatever, hindsight, I mean. I took the job. I was there for about a year. I kind of never stopped interviewing. Like I kept looking for I just never gave up. I wasn't satisfied with it, but I also met some incredible people, people I am still friends with. It was the first time that I actually made friends in Toronto, which was really special. Like, what a gift. My main client that I worked on was the CNE, so that was a very fun kind of welcome to the city. I got to know about that, which was kind of cool, and it gave me a lot of stuff that I wasn't getting on the East Coast that I was able to kind of parlay into my next move um at a big agency. So everything happens for a reason. It was a great experience. The people that I met were amazing, uh, but it certainly wasn't what I moved to Toronto for.
Do you think restarting your social circle the way you did by moving to Toronto, like you said, you didn't know anyone and it took a while to really build that, that helped build a bit of resilience for you in life and business? And I want to preface it by saying that something I went to an elementary school and then a different high school, so I had to restart my friend group. And then when I went to university, nobody went to university with me. And something that I only noticed when I was in university was the few people that went to the same elementary and high school struggled in university the first year making friends because they had made their friend groups when they were in kindergarten, and those had evolved over like the next 10, 12, whatever, how many more years. And then when they got to university and they were on their own, especially if they were living away, it was very difficult for them to make friends because they just didn't know how to do that and how to restart that. Did you find that that was a skill that you were potentially lacking because you had spent all of your time, or I should say most of your life in St. John, academically and professionally as well up until that point? Kind of a long way of saying it, but you know what I'm getting at.
Think so. We moved around. I moved different schools. Like I,
Okay.
so we went between like it's St. John's a small place, but in St. John, I moved kind of around. So we moved to different, um, from the suburbs into the city, from the city originally out to the suburbs. So in doing that, it made it so between elementary school and middle school, and then middle school and high school, I didn't go with the same kids. So
Okay, so you already had that experience of kind of
yeah,
restarting friend groups.
yeah. And I think it does make me a more open person. Like when I meet people that grew up and went to camp and did all the things in one city, they're not very open people. And I think you can feel that whether they're friendly or nice or kind, or I'm not talking about any of that, but I think there's a certain, I allow myself to be vulnerable and open with people, because I've had to make new friends. I've had to start
Mhm.
over, quite a few times.
You move on to cassette. When we were
Yeah,
doing pre-production work, you said that you felt like, what was it, you had won the lottery at this point? Do I have it right? Or it was your big break. That was your big
that
break.
is how I felt. I was so excited. I got hired to work on the McDonald's Canada account. It was a big agency. I was it was a Canadian agency. I was so excited, beyond excited. Um, and it was a great experience. I worked on a bunch of brands while I was at Cossette, but McDonald's was the main one that I worked on, and I definitely thrived there. Um, I just any project I could get my hands on, I wanted to work on. The clients that I had great relationships with. I was young, but I was given crazy opportunities because I think I was just so eager to do anything. um, and yeah, at the time, I certainly cannot speak for anyone else's experience, but I had a I look back at like very fond memories at Cassette overall.
And how did your roles change when you moved up into a brand supervisor role?
That's a big jump when you go from kind of those junior account roles into a supervisor and then into a director. Though the executive to supervisor and supervisor to director are kind of, I think, the hardest jumps to make, because the it's not ownership, it's now responsibility. So if something
Mm,
goes sideways, it's your fault. And I think that uh what I was lucky about was, as I was making those jumps, I was doing it with clients that knew me. So there was a bit of safety in that. I was doing it with a team that knew me. So there was a little bit of maybe if I had had some hiccups, I wasn't really aware of them because I had
mm.
these incredible, team kind of environments behind me that trusted me. they knew if I made a mistake, I'd learn from it and be fine in the next meeting. There was, I think, such a nice amount of leeway given to me as a young person, and a lot of opportunities, not just from my direct bosses, but leadership of the agency, the creative directors and chief creative officers, my boss's boss, the head of strategy at Cossette, and then also my clients. I was a young account person and had great support from the CMO of McDonald's and the head of advertising from McDonald's. That's really special. It gave me a lot of confidence as I grew.
Do you get a bit starstruck when, and it might be funny that I'm putting it this way, a little starstruck when you realize that you as a young account person have got a direct line to the CMO of McDonald's Canada? Because like in our world, they are celebrities.
Mm, No, I think I was too naive to really think about
Okay.
it that way. I'm glad I was too naive, because otherwise I was really just focused on what is the right thing to do for the business, which is, I think, why these senior people had made any time for me whatsoever. I wasn't trying to get into rooms with them. I wasn't I wasn't I wasn't political that way. All I was thinking about was, we have to do the right thing for the business, and we work handling the creative. So all I'm going to care about is the creative for your business and how to make it as breakthrough as possible so we can make you a lot of money.
Everything is going really well at Cassette, it sounds like. So how are you enticed to move over to Anomaly?
Oh my gosh, it was time. 4 years. I had done it. I did all the things.
Okay. Did you feel like you'd hit sort of like a proverbial sort of glass ceiling? There was nowhere else to go? Or did you kind of look back at your body of work, kind of like you're saying, and you said, there's nothing more I can do with this?
think I think advertising is a fairly, at least on the creative side, is a fairly emotional business. I think there wasn't anything at Cassette I wanted to work on that I hadn't worked on. There was a lot of leadership changes happening, and I had also just done a lot of things. I wanted to learn something new. I even feel like I feel that way now. I just want to learn. I just want to, I wish I could, even now, I wish I could sit in other agency meetings, not to spy on them or anything like that, but just because I'd like to geek out. I want to know how Aaron Starkman presents work. I'm kind of interested. It's just, I think that I wanted to just see another opportunity, and the Anomaly role came up. It was on beer. I had always wanted to work on beer.
Okay.
Um, so I jumped at the chance.
It's interesting what you said there because it's almost like auditing a class in university. You wish you could
Yeah,
kind
a
of
little bit.
you could like audit
I
like
know.
creative meetings at other companies.
I'd love to see. I want to see how everyone does their stuff. It's neat. It's interesting to me.
And you were working on the Bud Light account.
I was,
So
yes.
so what was it about the Bud Light account? Like you come from quick service restaurants. You had a number of brands. I shouldn't just say QSR, but you come from working on McDonald's and now you're working on probably one of the biggest beer brands in the country. I'd say probably the biggest light beer brand in the country.
Mhm. Yeah. I think I have worked on a lot of different categories, but what my expertise is in creative advertising. So the category doesn't really matter. It like In a lot of ways, I certainly know some things better than others. But I could figure it out if I had never worked on it before. Like, what we are ultimately here to do is interact with people so that people will interact with your brand. So what we're expertise in is how to persuade and move those people. And I think that's something that you always should hold your creative agency really accountable to. And that's what you should look for them as their expertise. And I think that I never thought about it like, uh, that I wasn't I just assumed I'd be able to do beer because I my job was to do advertising. And so it, but when I went into to work at Anomaly, that was really cool. It was the first, because of the way that Anomaly was set up at the time. I worked with a lot of creative teams out of New York, so I got exposure to what it, like, again, back to my point,
Okay, yeah.
auditing a class would be kind of like. I got to see what it would be like to work in a U.S. agency because the founders were all based in the U.S. The offices, at least at the time, worked really closely together, which was a neat experience. It was certainly a very intense experience, but the work that we did and it was the same when I worked at McDonald's. The work that we did on Bud Light at that time was pretty groundbreaking. It was capitalizing on social media the way that no other brand had done at the time. And it was going into their people, their target, through a passion point rather than, look, we're beer and it's, refreshing and delicious and low calorie, and all. It was going in at the time. They went all in on one specific passion point. I think the business has grown significantly since then, so they do more things, but at the time it was a really focused strategy, comm strategy, and it is still some of the coolest work that I've worked on, given where, how the social media worked at the time.
I want to take a step back to something you said a couple minutes ago. You mentioned that you had access to the decision makers and working with others in the United States as well. And I think you used the word that it was intense.
Mhm.
Did did you learn anything from what they were doing, or did you look at what they were doing and saying, look, maybe their approach wouldn't transfer over to Toronto, which is a little bit more relaxed? I'm just kind of looking at like sort of like cross-border, cross-cultural management styles.
Think, um, the way that I think it was I think I learned a ton. I learned a lot about how, uh, to position things inside of boardrooms. I learned a lot about kind of how to be bold as a creative agency. Like, not, I don't mean bold like you made a Super Bowl commercial and it was great. I mean, how do you even get a Super Bowl commercial made? That is not an easy task. That is not listening to every client piece of client feedback and saying, yes, you're right, we should do that. And I think Anomaly really taught me how to do it, that through a US lens, which we just don't have those budgets in Canada, so we wouldn't have as much of an opportunity to do those things. So there's nuance to it. There's you can't come in and hit people with a hammer. You have to be kind. Um, we did a lot of work on that. Like, we did a lot of work during that time when I was there, and uh, the the results speak for themselves. Like, it Bud Light at the time was massively lagging, and they basically closed the gap with Coors Light in a pretty short period of time. So that only happens when you make big swings, and that's what we did at the time.
I want to go back to what you said about the Super Bowl simply because this is going to go live. This episode is going live before the Super Bowl. I want to make sure I'm hearing it correctly and I'm digesting it properly. It's about, I guess, making a case for a Super Bowl commercial, but also presenting, well, what are we going to do special? Because you don't go to the Super Bowl and run your standard 30-second spot that everyone's seen over and over again. And then I guess that comes down to making a case for not just the media budget, but the creative budget as well, too, because both of those are incredibly expensive. Everything goes up exponentially when you mention the Super Bowl.
I think if a marketer makes a bet, a big bet, like a Super Bowl bet, there's so much pressure on that. They go into their executive team and they say, we're going to do this. We're going to spend a huge portion of our marketing budget on one day. Then they are going to come in with a commercial that's sort of crazy, probably doesn't hit on rational thinking in a lot of ways. And that's a really complicated thing to sell inside of a business environment. It's a hard thing to have that discussion inside of a boardroom. People, human beings, they're irrational. And creative agencies are sort of experts in this irrational behavior of human beings. That does not make a CFO happy. Those are not happy words for people that are very, rigorous about how they think about things. So if a marketer wants to make that bet, or they want to make any big bet in any big sort of social moment, they have to trust their creative agency so explicitly. And I think at that time, it was one of the things that I really learned about, that in order to protect something really great creatively, and I don't mean that from like a selfish place from the agency, I mean, you have to protect it so it can do what it's supposed to do. So it can make these irrational human beings that exist out in the world come and engage with our product, brand, service, whatever the thing might be. You have to be willing to have so many different conversations with key stakeholders. You have to be able to really partner with the head of marketing, with the people that are taking that risk, because never ever underestimate the fact that their job is probably somewhat on the line. Maybe not
Yes,
immediately.
that's
They
true.
are really, really placing a bet. So you have to be in it with them. And, on the flip side, if you're a marketer and all you're getting back from your agencies are these fun ideas, what about this? And they're not sitting down with you and talking about how are you socializing this inside of the organization? What do you need to make it happen? Can I sit with you on the media call so we can talk about how many times we're going to run this ad? Because let's face it, once you see a Super Bowl commercial more than twice, you start to get annoyed. There are things that just end up happening that your creative agency can really support you in. And I think that partnership is so much more than a script. And that's one of my big reasons I don't like calling it non-working dollars, because your creative should make it so you outperform every metric you've put on the table. If your creative agency is not beating every media metric, if you are not beating the business metrics, then you didn't push it hard enough.
Curious, how early does the conversation start about whether or not we should move forward with a Super Bowl ad?
Depends on the brand, but easily 6 months.
6 months, okay,
But
interesting.
probably it starts at annual planning. Like most brands, especially in this market, do not on a whim decide they're going to do a Super Bowl commercial.
Gotcha. No, because I figured that does the media ever have to be bought well before just to kinda hold the space just before
Yeah.
you even decide what yeah, because I figure it upfronts, usually in July or June. That's when a lot of the
Yes.
Super Bowl money's laid in, and by that point, it's like you're either committed or you're not.
I think some brands might gamble that all the slots don't sell because things are a little bit slower in Canada than in the US. It's certainly
Mm.
much more competitive in the US. So I think some brands might hold out, but the rates go up. It's just I also just fundamentally don't think it should be a whim of a decision. You should be able to kind of look ahead to say, is this somewhere that makes sense to be for the people I want to talk to based on when the halftime show gets announced, all of that kind of stuff that might influence what kind of people are going to be watching the game beyond just football fans.
Your next opportunity at John Street as an account supervisor, did you find that role or did the role find you?
The role kind of found me. And I mean, at the time, John Street was my agency crush. I think it was everybody's agency crush. It was just as they started selling um, to WPP. And it was just one of those dream agencies that I wanted to kind of go into. I think it was probably the agency at the time that it was neat because the founders were all still there and they were there every day. So you got to kind of be a fly
Mm,
on the
okay.
wall of these five people that started something incredibly special. And they were friends and two of them are married to each other. And it was that part. And the original people that were there when I got there, you could tell what a kind of family environment it was. And really smart. They had a way of doing things that was certainly, again, very different from anything I had seen before. This is why I want to be a fly on the wall at every agency, because every agency is so different. And at the time, uh, led by Emily Bain, the strategy department was, I think, unmatched in the city. Uh, I had never seen strategy done like that before. It was really cool at the time.
Okay, touch on that a little bit because creative shops, and I hope I'm not oversimplifying this, I've found that they're really as strong as their people. People move around
Totally.
and they people move around and they bring their styles with them. So over a number of years, a lot of senior people move around. You have to imagine that styles are going to overlap between and approaches to business are going to overlap between the agencies. So what made that so unique?
Well, those people didn't travel around. They were founders. They
Ah,
were
okay.
there.
All right.
It was their style. I think it was just very special because of that. They weren't rotating through a leadership group. The leadership group were the people that started it. And I do think that is something special about truly independent agencies with true founders at the table. They're all in. Their mortgages are on the line. Like it's not just
Fair
a
point. Yes.
salary piece. So that was the first time I had seen that. Cossette was independently owned, but they were massive. They weren't they weren't an independent agency the way that John Street was an independent agency. And even though WPP was coming in and they did end up buying them, and the leadership group has changed over a couple times since then, at the time, it was literally the people that that took the gamble, that took the risk, that put their all of their lives on the line for this dream that they had.
So would you say then your next role at Red Lion as a client service director was really truly your first holdco job?
Yeah. In the traditional sense, yes.
Okay.
Both Anomaly, I think Anomaly was owned by WPP, so I saw some holding company stuff there, but I was still young enough that it really didn't impact like my day to day. Then when I went to Red Lion, it existed as kind of a conflict agency and a digital creative hub for the Publicis Group. And it was a great experience. I got to see, really behind the curtain of what a holding company really is like to work in, especially at the time. There was big decisions that were made that I thought were great and big decisions that I thought were fundamentally terrible and were made anyway. It didn't matter what any individual kind of thought. So, um yeah, it was and we also we had some big accounts we worked on. We led Cadillac in Canada and did some really cool stuff with them, but that brand was a Holdco global brand. So it was the first time I had worked in a global system of holding companies that had a global brand, which was also cool.
Okay, so I'm glad you said that. So you found that cool then, whereas I know some people, because I've got a lot of agency friends, and when there's a client like that that's circulated through every agency globally, they say Canada is just kind of like a small piece of the puzzle. Maybe we get to localize things a little bit, but for the most part, we're beholden to decisions made in New York or London or LA.
Yeah, it wasn't my experience, but kind of what I was going back to before. I think in advertising, you there when you're thinking about your own career, there are kind of moments to take swings and risks. And we
Mm,
were at a international meeting for Cadillac to do the plan, and they were undergoing a whole uh, global rebrand of what the Cadillac brand meant. They had moved their headquarters to New York City. They were really focusing on China. The Europe market was starting to open up, and the Canadian market was a big priority. So we all were in New York at this meeting, and they had the U.S. plan, and that was going to be adapted U.S. Work, and it was basically the American flag flying on all
mm.
this work. And to talk about the nuance in the Canadian market versus the US market sometimes is a really challenging conversation for people to understand because it can be so nuanced. And I had to get up in front of this room of, 1,000 people and talk about why this big agency work that was a part of my network work is not going to work in Canada. And I was terrified, but I did it. And the whole global plan got scrapped because of what I said in that room. So
Nice. They were listening to you. Okay.
they had to because it was an undeniable argument. And I think that when you have those moments, you do have, regardless of how small you are or unknown you are, you have moments to make huge impact on the work. And I think I started learning that from a very young age. I used to get excited about seeing that I made an impact on like a banner ad. Like it's not just about these big moments, but it sort of led up to that. So, I did it kindly. I certainly wasn't it was not an emotional conversation at all. It just fundamentally wasn't gonna move the needle the way that they wanted to in Canada. So it can't be global work if you're gonna say it's global work.
It's funny that you bring that up. I'm not going to name the company, but there was a point in my career where I was discussing options with an American company, and they kept telling me about their grand ambitions for Canada, their revenue ambitions. And I kept looking at it going, we are not a country of 350 million people. Like, and what finally took it over the line, the discussion was, what's the population of Texas? What's the population of, I think it was Ohio? Put it together. That's all of Canada, second largest landmass. And then it started to bring them down to earth a little bit and help them understand that this needs to be approached a little bit differently. You can't just expect X amount of money out of a country that you're getting from individual regions. And just for perspective, I work in sales. So it was really managing those expectations. And I kind of put my career on the line at the beginning too. I said, it was just like, you either think I'm crazy and you're going to dismiss this, or this is the path towards success.
Yeah, and I think one of the bigger challenges that a lot of brands have is that the Canadians don't respond really well to these low churn ad placement pieces. Like, you can do kind of cheap and cheerful ad placements in China and just churn out, kind of churn and burn. And the consumer population is so aggressive there, it'll just work, and the consumerism is so high. There's a very high conservative population in Canada. People are always looking at where they're spending their dollars, even if they have a lot of money. And Canadian spending is certainly up, but where they're going to spend their money and with the brands they're going to trust are the ones that, put in a little bit more time. And that doesn't always mean, again, a Super Bowl ad. That is not the only solution
Mhm.
in terms of how you can break through to Canada and make it work. I Sometimes I say that and people assume I'm always talking about brand advertising. I'm not. But if you think that you can just pick up work easily, low funnel, put it through the market, and the business will just turn over here, it typically fails.
No, completely agree. So, as a creative advertiser, when you're brainstorming something, like you've got a brief from the beginning, do you sort of have a media channel bias? Like, is there something in your mind going, I'm automatically picturing that what we can do for out of home, like how the creative will be adapted for out of home versus video versus audio or just general digital?
Mm, no, I wouldn't say that. I think you can look at, like, one of the things that we wanted to do at TLC is make sure that we have a space that is not limited by a media plan or channel. And I don't mean we're not willing to work inside of a media channel. Media plans are extremely helpful and I love them. But if the idea was right and it didn't have a traditional media presence or media, you know, would our teams be able to create it in a way and bring it to life in a way that could make it really successful? Not every story works in billboards, not every story works on digital, not every story works in video, and not every brand can meet the levels that you need to meet in order to do it in an effective way that they're going to see a return. And ultimately, if a brand is spending money with a creative agency or a media agency and they don't see any sort of business lift outside of it, it is a very fast way to get fired. So I would rather have very honest conversations around what we're trying to do, who we're trying to reach, where and how we're trying to reach them, and then what that looks like. But the creative teams are great at just doing what they need to do. And that is coming up with ideas that can make irrational people kind of come in and do what we need them to do.
Okay, so let's bring things full circle to the local collective. I've had the opportunity to have a number of agency founders on my podcast. And something that everyone in the agency world seems to have in common is 100% of people say they all want to start their own agency, but it's like only a very small percentage of people want to move forward. And to be honest, some of them have said that they usually say that out loud when they're angry, like they're frustrated with their job and they're just like, screw it, I'm going to go out on my own. But
Mhm.
there's a small percentage of them that go out and make that jump. And so I'm going to assume that this idea was probably lingering for a while. And I want to know how long before you decided on the right moment to start the local collective.
No, I think it wasn't that long. If you would have asked me when I was even at Red Lion, like early days of Red Lion, if I wanted to start my own agency, I would have said, absolutely not. I'm not crazy.
Really?
Yeah, the whole time through, because I got asked it quite a few times. And I always said no. But like with literally everything else in my life, it kind of just happened. Matt and I had worked together at Cossette, and then we worked together again at Red Lion, and we have a fantastic way of working together. Um, it's always we. He is a fantastic creative leader, and uh, I think one of the things that's unique about our agency is the partnership at the very top is business and creative. Most of the time, it's either broken across, 7 leaders where there's like 7 layers of the stool and who the partners are, or it's all business at a founding level. I mean, like at the very, very top, everybody has the roles that happen, but it's either all business or it's all creative. And I think one of the things that makes TLC really special is we sort of married account service and creativity together in a way that's, I think, really reflective in all the work that we've produced because it is, it's very outside of the line sometimes in what we create.
So do you start by getting the company going after hours, like planting the seeds, getting a lot of sort of like the upstart administrative stuff, like incorporating all the unsexy stuff that no one talks about when it comes to business that you
Yeah.
have to do for legal reasons. And then, like, do you plant all those seeds? And then do you just kind of like, at what point do you say, okay, the seeds are planted. If this is going to grow, we've got to leave Red Lion, or I've got to
Yeah.
make a jump.
I think when we started, we were, like, stupid enough to start in a lot of ways. It seemed like the only option, I have to say, at the time.
So
It
you just
didn't
kind of
seem
quit and start. So there was this period
Yeah.
where you were just building the agency, and
Yes, and
not
we
that I ever want to talk about money, but like there's kind of no income coming in at this point.
yeah, it wasn't the best, but
I like the way you put that. Did you
no,
have
I think
flashbacks to being on that air mattress when you first moved to Toronto?
no, it wasn't that bad, but it,
But those
it
are the sort of things, like, not to cut you off, but those are the things that get into people's heads when they're thinking about going out on their own. They look at that and go, "Okay, there's gonna be some short-term pain and long-term gain if I really stick at it, but I don't know what that short-term pain is gonna look like." And you hear a lot of stories from, like, entrepreneurs, how they were kind of, like, just really down, then all of a sudden, something happened with the business that turned it around, and then it started to grow exponentially. Like, I know it sounds like a Disney movie, the way I'm putting it out there, but you know what I'm saying.
I think success doesn't happen overnight. Like, it sometimes looks like it does, but it certainly doesn't. I think that we were both deliriously optimistic about what we wanted to do. And I think it's in that delirium that made it work. Like, I think when I say it felt like the only option for us, it really felt like the only option. And had anything else seemed like a viable option, I am positive we would not be here today. So I don't think being an entrepreneur, especially in this city at this level that we're competing against, I think it's just something that kind of overtakes you a little bit and doesn't the, you have to do it. You can't even explain why you need to do it. Now, all the boring stuff like the paperwork and the legal stuff and the money and where is clients going to come from, you can't half do those things. You
Yes, you
can't
can't.
half start a creative agency in Toronto. That's called freelance. Like if you're going to have an agency through the ups and downs, then you're going to have an agency through the ups and downs. There is no day that is purely great, and there is no day that's purely bad. It is a roller coaster every week, something great and wild, and how the hell, what just happened? That happens every week. So it's not just the client's business that we're always trying to win and earn their trust and deliver fantastic results. It is our reputations on the line every single time something goes out. It has to be great.
Tell us about the moment you signed your first client.
We were excited. We were like, "Oh my gosh, we can pay bills." Okay, great. One of our first big client was Pizza, and that was great. They were going through a lot at the time, and it was special. Like, we just saw that whole team at an award show recently, and they all came up to us, and it they knew that they were our first big client. We weren't hiding it. They knew how important they were to us at the time. And it was such a good experience, and we still have such good relationships with them. They've moved on. They're with another agency now. They're doing great work with that other agency. But I think that those early days experiences for us were really special, and it's nice that it was special for them too.
Why the name The Local Collective? Where did that come from?
It was a feeling, we wanted to kinda convey. When you go to a restaurant or you go to a bar and you walk in and the bartender knows your name or your drink order or pretends like they know your name or your drink order, you sort of feel like a local or you wanna know where the locals go when you go traveling.
Mm.
We wanted that feeling, um, to kind of start happening between brands and customers. We wanted to convey this idea of your advertising at a mass level has to make someone feel something like they are going to choose you as the brand. You are the brand for them, and you have to make them feel like they're the consumer for you. So you have to do something that hits them, resonates with them, is for them. And that's where it came from. And then we loved the double of the TLC because every brand sometimes needs a little TLC.
Completely agree with that. So what does the company look like now versus day one?
Less chaotic. It feels, we turned 1 years old when the pandemic hit. It would have been way easier to start in the
Oh, gee.
pandemic
Really?
than, yeah,
Well, okay, so why so? Because I've spoken to a number of founders that had to endure the pandemic, and all of them kind of hold their breath when they talk about the first 2 to 3 months, trying to understand where the world was going, the industry was going, where the money was going. Why do you say that?
because we had just finished our first year. And when you're in advertising, you can never regain your first year. Your first year sets the tone for everything. And our tone that was being set got shut off. And then a bunch of agencies opened, and it was it would have been easier had we started in the pandemic. Um,
Interesting.
I can only say that because we're the agency that didn't. And knowing I got to know what I know because of it. But so that if I could do it without the pandemic, that would have been great. But that aside, we're still here. We survived. And um the agency at its core is exactly the same. We are still doing what we set out to do. We are still speaking and partnering with clients the way that we set out. We are making work that is a little, I think, unexpected or unique or coming at it from a way that maybe the rest of the category isn't, which is what we set out to do. And uh, we have a great team. Everybody's pretty happy at work. It's very collaborative. I think that for us, it's bringing together all of these great advertising experiences and maybe bad advertising experiences that we had at other agencies, and building something that for us uh, is kind of the dream job for. So that it's at its core, it's exactly the same. It's just a little bit more formal now, a little less run and gun.
And you've had an illustrious client list. Like I'm looking at here, we've got Food Banks Canada, the WNBA. Uh, is there anyone else that I'm missing you want to throw out there and give a shout out to?
Oh my gosh, there's been so many clients that we've had over the years. We just launched a campaign for Farber Debt Solutions, which is one of the largest insolvency firms in the country, and
I
their
see
work.
those ads on transit all the time. So
Yes,
transit out, your
they
ads are working and transit advertising works.
it works. It does work, and they're a fantastic client. They have a great mission, and I'm glad they exist. And then we also, I want to give a shout out to Safe Haven Toronto. It's an incredible organization that works with medically complex kids and their families. And they sort of catch everybody as they fall through the cracks in these systems, and they work in emergency services and respite services. It's a very, very special client, and we do a lot of really great work with them.
If anyone wants more information on the local collective, where can they go?
Localcollective.com.
Fantastic. And I'm going to put that at the bottom of the screen as well. And we're going to bring it home with rapid fire questions. You ready?
Yes.
Okay. The campaign you were most proud of.
Easy. It was the first Super Bowl campaign I ever did. It was a McDonald's campaign. It was called Around the World. And basically, we took a director, and this is before Instagram existed. Facebook existed, but not very little social media and no crew. It was him and a cameraman, and all he was allowed to say to, I think, 11 different countries he went to. We bought him an around the world ticket, and all he was allowed to say was the word McDonald's to see what happened.
Even
And
even going through customs?
no, 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 but when we were
Okay.
filming, when he was looking for directions and lost, and,
Gotcha.
it was this idea that on a
Oh, I'm
global
getting it
level,
now. Yeah.
McDonald's is kind of one of those things that you can always find, and, it brings us all together, and it was a experiment. Talk about a risk for a CMO at the time. So we don't have a script, and we're gonna send a director out to talk to real people. This is before man on the street stuff was happening. And it worked really well, and it was beautiful. And I think, at the time, one of the best performing brand spots that the brand had done. And it was neat. It had never been done before. It was very cool. It was a very cool experience.
Your favorite movie?
The original Star Wars trilogy. I'm not choosing
Is it
one. All
and
three.
not okay, not choosing one. Usually people
All three.
default to The Empire Strikes Back, so
Sure, but can you get there without the other two?
well put. If Hollywood were to make a movie based on your life story, who would you want to play you?
I'm gonna say Sigourney Weaver, specifically in her Alien era. I get I get told that a lot, so I'm gonna go with it.
My follow up, if Hollywood were to make that movie based on your life story, what would you call it?
I think I would just go with Kaitlin.
Your favorite book?
Kitchen Confidential by Anthony Bourdain. I think the world would misses him too much.
Your favorite song?
Oh, it depends on the day, the decade, the year. That's such a hard question. I'm gonna go with a happy tune by a Canadian band, Leather Jacket by the Arkells. It's happy, it's light, it's a love song. I wish it for everybody.
The best advice you've ever received?
Two things I would say. One from my mom. Anytime, regardless in my life, university, when I moved to Toronto, hard moments since I've been here, where I have called her and said, I can't do it. She always said, yes, you can. And that was it. That was the end of the advice. She would just always say, yes, you can. And I always felt like I could afterwards. It was strict and loving all at the same time. And it made it so it made me feel like I could do anything. And then the second was a boss that I had when I was at Cossette. And, I think I was in my, like, whiny account person, young person era, and I was complaining about, wanting to be invited to a meeting or something like that, and she said to me, "You are never gonna be invited into any room for the rest of your career unless you provide value. So, you
Mm.
have to have value, or else why would anyone put you in the room?" And again, it was very matter of fact, but it's accurate. Whether it's getting coffee, taking notes, holding the door open for it doesn't always have to be asking the question that's gonna set off the room and change everything. Like, value is not a measure of, worth at every level, but it's just I think I had forgotten that a little bit, you have to make a difference in people's lives if people are gonna want you around.
If you could go back in time and give your younger self advice, what would you say?
Don't be so scared. It's gonna work out okay.
And my signature closing question, if you weren't in advertising, what would you be doing and why?
I don't know, but I think I would still be an entrepreneur. I think I would have dreamt up some wild idea and done it. I don't know what it would have been because I didn't go through it, but I think I probably still would own my own business.
And we're going to end things right here. Caitlin, thank you so much for stopping by.
Thanks for having me.